The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the dark void between star systems. It was bigger than most planets and home to millions of beings from across the galaxy. Today, the Great Council chamber buzzed with excitement and worry. Ambassador. Zektar stood at the center of the circular room. His blue skin shimmered under the bright lights as he spoke to representatives from 47 different alien species. Some looked like giant insects, others like walking trees, and some were just floating clouds of gas that somehow could think and talk. Friends of the galaxy, Zektar said, his voice carrying to every corner of the huge room. We have a problem. For 300 years the humans have stayed hidden in their small corner of space. They refuse to talk to us. They refuse to trade with us. They refuse to let anyone enter their territory. A Xanthari captain named Jorik slammed his fist on his desk. He looked like a 7-foot-tall lizard with sharp teeth. Why do we even care about these humans? They only control 12 star systems. We control thousands. Dr. Velmoth, a Thakari scientist with 6 arms and compound eyes, clicked her mandibles nervously. Because Captain Jorik, they are the only species in the galaxy that has never been conquered, never been defeated, and never been understood. Every other species has joined the council or been forced to join. The humans just exist. The room fell quiet. Everyone remembered the stories their grandparents told about the early days of galactic expansion. Every species had tried to contact or conquer the humans at least once. All had failed, not because the humans fought back with great armies or superweapons, but because something always went wrong. Ships would malfunction, crews would become sick. Some explorers would return speaking nonsense about lights in their heads and voices that were not their own. There is more, Zektar continued. 3 days ago, a human ship broke down near Kepler Station. The crew asked for help, which surprised everyone. It was the first time in 50 years that humans had been seen outside their territory. On the main screen, a picture appeared of a man with brown hair and kind eyes. He wore a simple blue uniform with no fancy decorations. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human ship Aurora's Edge. His engine failed while carrying medical supplies to one of their outer colonies. He and his crew are now waiting at Kepler Station for rescue. The alien representatives leaned forward in their seats. Some whispered to each other in languages that sounded like music or grinding metal. What makes this interesting, Zektar said, is that Captain Morrison's ship uses technology we do not understand. Our best engineers looked at his broken engine. They could not figure out how it works. The materials are common metals and crystals, but they are put together in ways that should not be possible. Dr. Velmoth raised one of her arms. I have studied the video recordings of Captain Morrison. He speaks our common language perfectly, but his brain patterns are unlike any species we have ever encountered. When he talks, our telepathic species get headaches. When he moves, our energy sensors show readings that make no sense. Captain Jorik laughed, but it sounded forced. You are all afraid of one broken-down human ship? Not afraid, Zektar replied. Curious, Captain Morrison and his crew have been polite and helpful. They answered our questions about their culture and history, but when we asked why humans stay isolated, they just smiled and said we would understand someday. The room grew quiet again. Everyone had heard stories about human politeness. They never threatened anyone. They never showed anger, they just quietly kept everyone away from their space. Yesterday, something else happened, Zektar continued. 2 more human ships arrived at Kepler Station. They came to rescue Captain Morrison. One ship was commanded by Dr. Lisa Parker, a human scientist. The other was led by Commander Rick Hayes, a human military officer. New pictures appeared on the screen. Dr. Parker was a woman with red hair and green eyes. She wore a white coat over her blue uniform. Commander Hayes was a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes. His uniform was dark green with silver markings. Dr. Parker brought equipment to fix Captain Morrison's engine. Our scientists watched her work. She used tools that looked simple, but they did things our advanced technology cannot do. She repaired metal by touching it with her bare hands. She made broken computer parts work again just by looking at them. That is impossible, said Ambassador Thexara, a being that looked like a walking crystal. No species can manipulate matter with thought alone. Commander Hayes was even more interesting, Zektar said. He carried no weapons, but our security sensors showed him as the most dangerous being on the station. When he walked past our guards, they felt sick and dizzy. Some reported hearing voices in their heads telling them to sleep. The images on the screen changed to show the 3 human ships leaving Kepler Station. They moved in perfect formation, like they were connected by invisible strings. Before they left, Dr. Parker made an offer. She said humans would be willing to share some of their medical knowledge if we promised to stop sending spy ships to their borders. She knew about every secret mission we have sent for the past 50 years. She knew the names of our spies, the types of ships we used, and the routes they took. Captain Jorik's scales turned pale. How could they know about classified military operations? That is what we need to find out, Zektar said. I propose we send an official diplomatic mission to the edge of human space, not to spy or attack, but to ask for a meeting. If they refuse, at least we will have tried. If they agree, we might finally understand what makes humans so different. The vote was unanimous. Every species wanted to know the truth about humanity. Within hours, a fleet of 6 ships was prepared. Captain Jorik would lead the military escort. Dr. Velmoth would head the scientific team. Representatives from the major galactic powers would handle diplomacy. As the meeting ended, Ambassador Zektar looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans lived their quiet lives in their 12 star systems. Soon, the galaxy would finally learn what secrets they had been keeping for 3 centuries. The expedition fleet departed Nexus Prime the next morning, heading toward the edge of human space. None of them knew they were about to discover something that would change the galaxy forever. The alien fleet moved slowly through space toward the human border. 6 large ships carried the best diplomats, scientists, and soldiers the galaxy had to offer. Captain Jorik stood on the bridge of his warship, watching the stars ahead. His crew checked their weapons and shields every hour, but deep down he wondered if their technology would matter at all. Dr. Velmoth floated in her science lab, studying every scan they took of the region ahead. The space around human territory looked normal, but her instruments picked up strange energy patterns that made no sense. It was like the vacuum of space itself was alive and watching them. "Captain," called his communications officer, "we are approaching the human border system. Our charts call it Sol 7. Jorik nodded. "All ships reduce speed and power down weapons. We come in peace, just like we planned." But before anyone could respond, 3 small ships appeared out of nowhere. They had not been there a second before. No sensors had detected them coming. They just materialized like ghosts becoming solid. The human ships looked old and simple. Their hulls were gray metal with no fancy decorations. They had basic engines and simple weapon ports that seemed almost primitive compared to the alien fleet's advanced technology. Each ship was about the size of a large fighter, tiny compared to the massive alien vessels. "Unknown ships, this is Lieutenant Danny Cooper of the Human Defense Force," came a calm voice over the radio. "You have entered restricted space. Please, state your business and prepare to be escorted back to neutral territory." Captain Jorik activated his own communicator. "This is Captain Jorik of the Galactic Council Fleet. We come seeking peaceful contact with human leadership. We wish to establish diplomatic relations." There was a pause. Then Lieutenant Cooper spoke. Again. "I understand your intentions, Captain Jorik. However, no foreign vessels are permitted in human space without explicit authorization from Earth Command. This authorization has never been granted to any non-human species." Dr. Velmoth watched her scanners with growing confusion. The 3 human ships showed on her screens as barely functional. Their power levels were low, their shields were weak, and their weapons looked like toys. Yet something felt very wrong about the readings. "Lieutenant Cooper," Captain Jorik said, trying to sound reasonable, "we have come a long way for this meeting. Surely we can discuss this matter with your superiors." "I have already contacted my superiors, Captain. Commander Kate Sullivan is on her way with additional ships. In the meantime, I must ask you to power down your weapons and prepare to leave human space." Captain Jorik looked at his tactical officer, a Xanthari warrior named Vextar. "What do our sensors show about their capabilities?" Vextar's scales rippled with confusion. "Sir, Their ships appear almost defenseless. Minimal shielding, basic weapons, low power output. Our fleet could destroy all three in seconds. Then why do I feel like we are the ones in danger? Jorik muttered. Lieutenant Cooper's voice came again. Captain, I am reading elevated stress levels from your crew. Please try to remain calm. Strong. Emotions can cause problems in this region of space. Dr. Velmoth's compound eyes widened. How could the human know about their crew's emotional state? Her own sensors could not read biological signs through the alien ship's advanced shielding. Lieutenant Cooper, she said, activating her own communicator. This is Dr. Velmoth of the Galactic Science Council. May I ask how you are monitoring our crew's condition? Hello, Dr. Velmoth. I have read your research papers on xenobiology. Very impressive work. Lieutenant Cooper's voice carried genuine warmth. As for your question, it is not something I can easily explain. Let me just say that humans are very good at sensing the emotional state of other beings. Before anyone could respond, the human ships began to move. They did not use their engines. They simply glided through space like they were swimming through water instead of vacuum. As they moved, the alien fleet's weapon systems began to shut down one by one. What is happening? Captain Jorik shouted to his crew. Sir, our weapons are powering down on their own. Our shields are dropping to minimum levels. Our engines are reducing power. His tactical officer reported. I cannot stop it. The systems are not responding to commands. The same thing was happening to all 6 alien ships. Their most advanced technology was simply turning itself off and no one could figure out why. Do not be alarmed, Lieutenant Cooper said. Your ships are not damaged. Your systems will return to normal once you move back into neutral space. This is a safety feature of human territory. Dr. Velmoth stared at her instruments in disbelief. This is impossible. There is no known technology that can remotely disable our systems without some form of signal or weapon beam. We are detecting nothing. 2 more voices joined the conversation. This is Sergeant Amy Rodriguez and Corporal Steve Johnson. We are Lieutenant Cooper's wingmen. Captain Jorik, we have been monitoring your fleet since you left Nexus Prime. We know you come in peace, but we cannot allow you to enter our space. You have been watching us for days? Captain Jorik asked. How? Our ships have the best stealth and detection systems in the galaxy. Your technology is very impressive, Corporal Johnson said, but it works on principles that assume space is empty and lifeless. Human space is neither empty nor lifeless. Before anyone could ask what that meant, more human ships appeared. Not 3 or 4, but dozens. They surrounded the alien fleet in perfect formation. These ships were larger and looked more advanced, but they still seemed simple compared to alien technology. This is Commander Kate Sullivan, came a new voice, strong and confident. I apologize for the delay. I was in a meeting with our xenology department about your arrival. Commander Sullivan, Dr. Velmoth said, we came here seeking understanding. Your people have remained isolated for 3 centuries. The galaxy wishes to know why. I understand your curiosity, Doctor. But the reasons for our isolation are not something we can explain in a brief conversation. What you call isolation, we call protection. Protection for whom? Captain Jorik asked. Protection for everyone, Commander Sullivan replied. Captain, I am going to ask you to return to neutral space. Your crews are beginning to show signs of exposure to human territory. Much longer here and some of them may become permanently affected. As if to prove her point, several alien crew members on different ships began reporting headaches, dizziness, and strange dreams. Some claimed to hear voices speaking in languages they did not recognize. Others said they could sense the thoughts of their shipmates. What is happening to us? Dr. Velmoth whispered. You are experiencing what every alien species experiences in human space, Commander Sullivan said gently. Your minds are trying to adapt to an environment they were not designed for. We learned long ago that extended exposure can cause lasting psychological changes in non-human species. The alien fleet began moving back toward neutral space, their ships somehow guided by invisible forces. As they crossed back over the border, their weapons and shields came back online. The strange sensations affecting the crews faded away. Commander Sullivan? Captain Jorik called as the human ships prepared to leave. Will your people ever be willing to explain what we experienced today? Perhaps someday, Captain. When the galaxy is ready to understand that evolution takes many forms and not all of them are visible to instruments or explainable by science. The human ships vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving the alien fleet alone in neutral space with more questions than answers. Back at Nexus Prime, the alien leaders were angry and confused. The peaceful contact mission had failed, and they still knew nothing about human capabilities. In secret meetings, some species decided they needed a different approach. Commander Crix of the Zenthari Special Forces met with Sindal, a Villani intelligence operative, in a hidden room deep inside the station. Both were experts at sneaking into places where they did not belong. The humans are hiding something important, Crix said, his reptilian eyes glowing in the dim light. My government wants to know what it is. Sindal nodded, her shape-shifting abilities allowing her to look like any species she chose. My people agree. We have developed new stealth technology that even human sensors cannot detect. We will find out their secrets. 3 days later, a small, invisible ship crossed into human space. It used technology that bent light around itself, making it completely unseen. The ship's engines were silent and its hull absorbed all forms of scanning beams. By all rights, it should have been undetectable. Commander Crix piloted the ship while Sindal monitored their surroundings. 2 other operatives, a Thakari named Kixtel and a Borvani called Merdok, prepared their recording equipment. They planned to observe a human colony world and finally learn the truth. Target acquired, Crix whispered into his communicator. Human colony world designated New Texas by their own charts. Population approximately 50,000. No orbital defenses visible. Iudiao. Planet looked normal from space. It had blue oceans, green continents, and white clouds. Cities dotted the surface, connected by roads and transportation systems. Everything seemed peaceful and ordinary. Beginning descent, Crix reported. All stealth systems functioning perfectly. No indication we have been detected. They landed in a forest outside the main city and activated their personal cloaking devices. The 4 spies became invisible to all known forms of detection. They had used this technology to infiltrate dozens of species without ever being caught. The city of New Texas looked like something from an old Earth picture book. Houses had white fences and green lawns. Children played in parks while adults went about their daily business. Markets sold food and clothes just like any normal civilization. But as the spies watched more closely, they began to see things that made no sense. A farmer named Bill Turner was working in his fields, but he was not using any machines. He pointed at the soil and it began to turn itself over, preparing for planting. He gestured at seeds and they flew through the air, planting themselves in perfect rows. Water rose from a nearby well without any pumps and spread across the field in a gentle rain. Are you recording this? Crix whispered to his team. Yes, but the instruments show nothing unusual, Kixtel replied. According to our scanners, the farmer is just standing in an empty field doing nothing. In town, a teacher named Mary Collins was working with a group of children in a schoolyard. The children were playing a game that involved making small rocks float in the air. They laughed as they moved the stones around each other in complex patterns like a dance performed in mid-air. The children are manipulating matter with their minds, Sindal reported. But our sensors detect no energy, signatures, no technology, no explanation for what we are seeing. An engineer named Tony Martinez was working on a construction project. He needed to move large metal beams into place, but instead of using cranes or machines, he simply looked at them. The beams rose into the air and positioned themselves exactly where they needed to be. Tony smiled and moved on to the next task. This is impossible, Merdok muttered. No species can move objects with thought alone. There must be hidden technology we cannot detect. Old Pete Williams, a man with gray hair and kind eyes, was tending to his garden. The plants around him grew faster as he walked past them. Flowers bloomed and vegetables ripened as if months were passing in minutes. He hummed a quiet song and the plants seemed to sway to the music. The spies followed him, staying invisible and silent. But as they got closer, Pete stopped humming and turned around. "You know, it is not polite to spy on people," he said, looking directly at their invisible forms. "Why do not you come out and introduce yourselves properly?" The four operatives froze in terror. Their cloaking technology was perfect. No known sensors could penetrate it. Yet this old human farmer was staring right at them. "Do not be afraid," Pete said gently. "I am not going to hurt you. But your presence is making the plants nervous. They can sense your confusion and fear." "Impossible," Crix whispered, but his voice carried clearly to Pete's ears. "Not impossible, just different," Pete replied. "You see, humans experience the world in ways that your instruments cannot measure. We feel the life energy in all things. Your cloaking devices hide you from machines, but they cannot hide you from awareness itself." A construction worker named Carlos Lopez approached from down the street. Behind him walked Nancy Adams, an elderly woman who had once been a pilot. They were not running or acting like they were responding to an alarm. They just walked over casually, as if meeting invisible aliens was something that happened every day. "Hello there," Nancy said warmly. "Welcome to New Texas. I apologize for the informal reception, but we do not get many visitors. Are you here on official business or just curious?" "How can you see us?" Sindel asked, her voice shaking with disbelief. "How can you not see yourselves?" Carlos replied with a smile. "You are standing right there, thinking your thoughts, feeling your emotions. You might as well be shouting your presence to anyone who knows how to listen." More humans began to gather around the invisible spies. A woman pushing a baby carriage stopped to watch. Children playing in a nearby park came over to see what was happening. A man walking his dog paused to observe the scene. "Please do not be alarmed," Nancy said. "We mean you no harm, but your stealth technology creates a kind of blindness that is very obvious to human senses. It is like watching someone walk around with their eyes closed, bumping into things they cannot see." "What are you?" Murdoch asked, his scientific mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. "We are humans," Pete said simply. "We are what we have always been. The question is not what we are, but what you are ready to understand about the nature of consciousness itself." An 8-year-old boy named Bobby Clark ran up to the group. He looked at the invisible aliens with bright, curious eyes and asked, "Why are you hiding? Nobody here is scary. Do you want to see my pet rabbit? His name is Buttons, and he can do tricks." Before anyone could answer, Bobby reached out and touched Sindel's cloaked arm. The moment his small hand made contact, her invisibility flickered and failed. She became visible to everyone around them. "Oops," Bobby said with a giggle. "Sorry about that. Sometimes I forget that other people's toys are fragile." One by one, the other spies became visible as more humans approached them. Their perfect stealth technology, developed over centuries and tested against every known detection method, was completely useless against human perception. "I think," Nancy said kindly, "it is time we had a proper conversation about why you are really here. Mayor Frank Davis is expecting you for dinner. He has been waiting since you entered our system 3 days ago." Mayor Frank Davis sat behind a simple wooden desk in his office. He was a man in his 50s with gray hair and laugh lines around his eyes. The 4 alien spies sat across from him, no longer invisible, drinking coffee from ceramic mugs. Outside, the window, children played in the park while their parents watched and smiled. "I apologize for the informal capture," Frank said with a warm smile. "We knew you were coming long before your ship entered our system. We have been preparing for this conversation for quite some time." Commander Crix shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "How did you know? Our stealth technology is perfect. We have used it successfully on hundreds of worlds." "Because, Commander, your technology hides you from machines and instruments. It does not hide you from minds that can feel your presence across space." Frank took a sip of his coffee. "Every human in this city knew you were here the moment you landed. We felt your curiosity, your fear, and your confusion." Sindel leaned forward. "You are saying that humans can read minds?" "Not exactly," Frank replied. "We can sense emotions, intentions, and life energy. When someone approaches with hostile intent, we feel it. When someone is afraid, we know it. When someone is curious, like you four, we can tell from many miles away. Dr. Helen Carter entered the office carrying a thick book and several old photographs. She was a woman in her 40s, with brown hair and kind eyes. She taught history at the local school and served as the town's record keeper. "I brought the materials you requested, Frank," she said, setting the items on the desk. "The full history of human development over the past 3 centuries. She turned to the alien spies with a gentle smile. "I understand you have questions about why we live in isolation. The answer is not simple, but it is important for your species to understand." Helen opened the book to a page filled with old pictures. The images showed humans from 300 years ago. They looked exactly like modern humans, but something in their eyes was different. They looked tired and confused. 3 centuries ago, humans were much like your species, Helen began. We used technology to solve our problems. We built machines to help us work. We relied on instruments to understand the world around us. Then something changed. She turned to another page showing newspaper headlines and scientific reports. The words spoke of strange events happening all over Earth. People began reporting that they could sense other people's emotions. Children started moving objects without touching them. Some humans claimed they could see energy patterns around living things. "We called it the awakening," Helen continued. "Within 50 years, every human on Earth and our early colonies developed what your species would call psychic abilities. We could influence matter with focused thought. We could sense the emotions and intentions of others. We could feel the life energy in plants, animals, and even the planet itself." Kixtel, the Thakari scientist, clicked his mandibles nervously. "This is impossible. No species evolves that quickly. Genetic changes take millions of years." "You are correct," Helen said. "This was not genetic evolution. It was consciousness evolution. Human minds learned to connect directly with the quantum field that underlies all reality. We began to perceive and interact with the universe in ways that your instruments cannot measure." Frank picked up one of the old photographs. It showed a group of humans standing with various alien species. Both groups looked happy and friendly. "This picture was taken during our last attempt at normal galactic contact, about 250 years ago." He set down another photograph. This one showed the same aliens, but they looked sick and frightened. Some were holding their heads as if in pain. Others stared into space with empty expressions. "This was taken 3 days later," Frank said quietly. The alien visitors had been exposed to human consciousness for too long. Their minds could not handle the constant input of human thoughts and emotions. Some went insane. Others fell into comas. Several died from the psychological trauma. Sindal stared at the pictures in horror. "You killed them with your minds?" "Not intentionally," Helen replied sadly. "Humans at that time could not control their abilities. We broadcast our thoughts and emotions constantly. For species that evolved to have private minds, the experience was overwhelming. Imagine if you could suddenly hear the thoughts of everyone around you all the time, whether you wanted to or not. That is why we chose isolation," Frank added. "Not because we feared other species, but because we feared harming them. Every time aliens visited human space, they became sick from exposure to our consciousness. We decided it was better to stay separate until we learned to control our abilities." Carlos Lopez knocked on the office door and entered. Behind him came Nancy Adams and Pete Williams. They had been asked to join the meeting as examples of how human abilities worked in daily life. "Carlos here is our best example of matter manipulation," Frank said. "Carlos, would you show our guests how you work?" Carlos picked up a broken pen from Frank's desk. He held it in his palm and focused his attention on it. The pen began to change shape, its plastic flowing like liquid until it became a perfect, miniature sculpture of a bird. Then the plastic hardened again, creating a detailed work of art. "I do not use machines or tools," Carlos explained. "I simply focus my intention on what I want the material to become. The atoms rearrange themselves according to my will." Nancy stepped forward. "I was a pilot for 40 years before I retired. Human ships do not work the way alien ships work. Our engines are guided by the crew's collective consciousness. We do not navigate by instruments alone. We feel our way through space, sensing gravitational fields and energy patterns directly. Pete smiled and gestured toward the window. The plants in my garden grow so well because I share my life energy with them. I can feel their needs and provide what they require. It is not magic or technology. It is simply how humans interact with the living world. But how? Murdoch asked desperately. How can consciousness affect physical matter? Helen opened the book to its final chapter. We spent 2 centuries studying that question. What we learned is that consciousness is not produced by the brain, as most species believe. Consciousness is a fundamental force of the universe, like gravity or electromagnetism. The brain is simply an antenna that receives and focuses consciousness. Human brains, Frank continued, evolved to be very sensitive antennas. We can receive and transmit consciousness more clearly than most species. This allows us to influence quantum fields directly, which in turn affects physical matter. Your species, Helen said gently, are not wrong to rely on technology. You simply evolved along a different path. You developed tools to extend your physical capabilities. We developed minds to extend our conscious capabilities. Commander Crick sat in stunned silence for a long moment. Finally, he asked, Are we in danger just by being here? Some danger, yes, Frank admitted. Extended exposure to human consciousness can cause permanent changes in alien minds. That is why we must send you back to your people soon. But we wanted you to understand the truth first. The galaxy believes we are hiding superweapons or advanced technology, Nancy said. The reality is much simpler and much more complex. We are hiding our evolution into something your species are not ready to encounter safely. What happens now? Sindal asked. Frank stood up and walked to the window. Below, children played while their parents watched. Everyone looked peaceful and happy, unaware that their very existence was reshaping the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be intelligent life. Now, Frank said, you return to your people with the truth. And perhaps if your species are ready, we can begin to teach others how to develop their own conscious abilities safely. The universe is much stranger and more wonderful than any of us imagined. 3 weeks later, the biggest meeting in galactic history took place aboard Nexus Prime. Representatives from every known species filled the great council chamber. At the center of the room sat 4 very different groups of beings. The alien spies who had visited New Texas sat at one table, still recovering from their experience. Commander Crix looked older and more thoughtful than before. Sindal kept staring at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. Both Kixtel and Murdoch had requested extended medical leave to process what they had learned. At another table sat the human delegation. Ambassador Patricia Moore led the group, a woman with silver hair and calm blue eyes. Admiral Kevin Scott sat beside her, a tall man with a gentle manner that seemed odd for a military leader. Dr. Angela Foster completed the human team, a young scientist who specialized in consciousness research. The third table held the galactic leaders who had sent the spy mission. They whispered among themselves, trying to understand reports that seemed impossible. The fourth table was reserved for the medical teams that had examined the returning spies. Ambassador Zektar called the meeting to order. His usual confidence was replaced by obvious nervousness. We have gathered to hear the report of our reconnaissance mission to human space. What they discovered will change how we understand intelligent life in the galaxy. Commander Crick stood slowly. When he spoke, his voice was different than before, softer, more thoughtful. Honored delegates, we went to human space expecting to find hidden weapons or secret technology. What we found was much more significant. We found a species that has evolved beyond the physical limitations that define the rest of us. Murmurs filled the chamber. Several representatives demanded immediate explanation. Dr. Velmoth, who had been studying the spy mission reports, activated her communicator. The evidence is overwhelming. Humans possess abilities that operate outside known physical laws. They can manipulate matter through conscious intent. They can sense emotions and thoughts across vast distances. They can affect the operation of our most advanced technology simply by being present. Ambassador Moore stood gracefully. If I may address the council, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the huge chamber. Commander Crix and his team have experienced something that took humanity 2 centuries to understand. We have evolved to interact directly with the quantum field that underlies all physical reality. That is impossible, shouted Ambassador Thexara. Consciousness cannot affect quantum mechanics, Dr. Foster smiled gently. With respect, Ambassador, your statement reflects the limitations of current galactic science. Your species developed along technological paths because you believe consciousness is separate from physical reality. Humans learned that consciousness and physics are part of the same unified system. Admiral Scott activated a small device on the table. Immediately, every weapon system in Nexus Prime powered down. Life support continued working, but all military technologies simply stopped functioning. How did you do that? Demanded Captain Jorik. I asked the systems to rest, Admiral Scott replied simply. Most technology responds to conscious intention when approached correctly. Your computers and weapons are not truly separate from the minds that created them. The device was turned off and all systems returned to normal. The demonstration had lasted only 30 seconds, but its implications terrified the alien delegates. Are you threatening us? Asked a Borvani representative. Never, Ambassador Moore said firmly. We are showing you why we maintain isolation. Human consciousness affects alien technology and alien minds in ways that can be harmful. We chose separation to protect you, not to threaten you. Sindal spoke for the first time since returning from New Texas. Her voice was quiet but clear. During our time on the human world, I began to experience their consciousness directly. I could feel the emotions of humans around me. I could sense the life energy in plants and animals. For 3 days, I lived as humans live every moment of their existence. She paused, struggling with words to describe her experience. It was beautiful and terrifying. My mind was not designed for such awareness. I nearly lost my sanity from the overwhelming input. The humans helped me limit the experience, but I will never be the same. Dr. Foster nodded sympathetically. This is why we cannot have normal diplomatic relations. Prolonged exposure to human consciousness causes permanent changes in alien neural patterns. Some species adapt better than others, but all are affected. What do you propose? Asked Ambassador Zektar. Admiral Scott stood and gestured to a holographic display that appeared above the table. It showed plans for a new type of space station. We propose limited contact through specially designed facilities, he said. These stations would be located in neutral space, equipped with consciousness-dampening fields that allow safe interaction between humans and other species. The hologram showed humans working alongside various alien species, but separated by invisible barriers that prevented psychic contact. Additionally, Ambassador Moore continued, we offer training programs for species that wish to develop their own consciousness abilities. The path we took was accidental and dangerous. We can teach others to evolve more safely. A young Thakari scientist named Bel Tar raised her arm. Are you saying that other species can learn these abilities? Dr. Foster smiled warmly. Every intelligent species has the potential for consciousness evolution. You simply evolved to express it through technology, rather than direct mental ability. With proper training, many of you could learn to perceive reality as humans do. What would be the cost of such training? Asked a practical-minded Zenthari delegate. No cost except time and effort, Ambassador Moore replied. Consciousness cannot be bought or sold. It can only be developed through patient practice and understanding. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some species feared human abilities and wanted stronger isolation. Others were fascinated and demanded immediate access to consciousness training. A few suggested that humans should suppress their abilities to allow normal galactic contact. Finally, old Ambassador Zektar called for order. We will vote on the human proposal. All in favor of establishing limited contact through protected facilities? The vote was close, but it passed. 31 species voted in favor, 16 voted against. 6 months later, the first human-alien contact station opened at Haven Point, a neutral location between human and galactic space. Captain Jake Morrison, the merchant whose broken ship had started this entire process, became the station's first human trade coordinator. Dr. Angela Foster established the Consciousness Development Institute on the station. Her first students included Sindal, who had volunteered to be a test subject for cross-species consciousness training, and young Beltar, whose scientific curiosity overcame her species' natural caution. The early results were promising. Several alien species showed natural aptitude for basic consciousness awareness. A few even learned to sense emotions in others or influence simple objects through focused thought. But the most significant change was not in abilities gained. It was in understanding achieved. For the first time in galactic history, different species began to comprehend that intelligence could take forms they had never imagined. Commander Crix, now recovered from his experience, served as a liaison between the galactic military and human defense forces. He often stood on the observation deck of Haven Point, watching humans and aliens work together in their protected environments. They were right, he told visiting dignitaries. The galaxy was not ready to understand what humanity had become, but perhaps we are learning. In human space, life continued as it always had. Children played games that involved floating objects and sensing each other's emotions. Adults worked in harmony with their environment, shaping matter through will and intention. The isolation that had lasted 3 centuries was finally beginning to end. But it was ending slowly, carefully, with protection for everyone involved. Because humans had learned the most important lesson of consciousness evolution. That great power required even greater responsibility.
The stars looked different from Jupiter orbit. Captain James Walker stood at the main viewport of the HS Defiant, watching the massive gas giants whirling storms below. His weathered hands clasped behind his back, knuckles white with tension. 20 years of space combat experience told him these might be humanity's final hours. The Defiant's bridge crew worked in tense silence, broken only by the soft beeping of sensor equipment and quiet status reports. They all knew what was coming. The Dominion's main fleet had just passed Saturn's orbit, over 10,000 warships strong. Against them stood the last 300 ships of the human fleet, gathered here in humanity's last stand. Status report on the resonance cascade system, Walker called out, his voice steady despite the weight pressing down on his shoulders. The experimental weapon was their only hope, their last chance to prove that humanity wouldn't go quietly into the night. Integration at 68%, Captain, replied Lieutenant Rogers from her engineering station. Chief Miller says he needs at least 2 more hours before the system will be combat ready. Walker nodded, knowing they wouldn't have 2 hours. The Dominion fleet was pushing their engines hard, eager to finish what they'd started 3 years ago when they first attacked Earth's colonies. Since then, it had been a steady retreat, watching human worlds fall one by one to the alien superior technology. But the Defiant was different. She was humanity's newest warship, built with technology reverse-engineered from crashed Dominion vessels. More importantly, she carried the results of Project Thunderbolt, a weapon that could theoretically exploit a fundamental weakness in Dominion shield systems. If it worked, it would change everything. If it failed, humanity would join the long list of civilizations the Dominion had crushed beneath their boots. Captain, called out Jones from the sensor station, his young face pale in the blue glow of his screens. Long-range scans picking up something strange. The Dominion fleet, they're splitting up. Walker strode to the sensor station, studying the tactical display. The massive red blob representing the Dominion fleet was indeed separating into 3 distinct groups. It was a departure from their usual tactics of overwhelming force. They're being cautious, Walker muttered, more to himself than the crew. They know about the Defiant. They know we've built something new. The realization hit him like a physical blow. If the Dominion was showing caution, it meant their spies had learned about Project Thunderbolt. They didn't know exactly what it did, but they knew it was dangerous enough to change their standard tactics. Send word to Admiral Stone, Walker ordered. The Dominion knows about the Defiant. They'll try to take us out first. He paused, considering their options. And get me Chief Miller. Now. Minutes later, the chief engineer's gruff voice came through the bridge speakers. Miller here, Captain. We're working as fast as we can, but rushing the integration could blow us all to hell. We don't have a choice, Tom, Walker replied, using the engineer's first name, something he rarely did. The Dominion is coming for us specifically. How close to their ships do we need to be for the resonance cascade to work? There was a long pause. Theoretically, no more than 50,000 kilometers. But, Captain, the equations we're working with, they're more complex than anything humanity has ever attempted. We're talking about manipulating quantum fields in ways that shouldn't be possible. That's why they'll never see it coming, Walker said. Keep working. We'll buy you all the time we can. He turned to his tactical officer. Lieutenant Reed, plot a course deeper into Jupiter's gravity well. We'll use the radiation belts to mask our energy signature. The massive warship turned gracefully, its dark hull gleaming in Jupiter's reflected sunlight. The Defiant was beautiful in a functional way, sleek yet powerful, with none of the ornate designs the Dominion favored. She was built for one purpose: to fight back. As they descended toward Jupiter's upper atmosphere, Walker received a priority message from Admiral Stone. The old admiral's face appeared on his private screen, looking even more tired than Walker felt. Jim, our long-range scouts just reported in. The Dominion fleet isn't just being led by any commander. The Supreme Commander himself is heading this operation. His flagship has been confirmed among the approaching forces. Walker's jaw tightened. The Supreme Commander was notorious for his hatred of humanity, viewing them as uppity primitives who needed to be taught their place in the galaxy. He'd personally overseen the destruction of Mars Colony, broadcasting the deaths of 2 million colonists as a warning to Earth. Understood, Admiral. Request permission to engage the Supreme Commander's group directly once the resonance cascade is ready. Stone's expression was grim. Granted. But Jim, if this doesn't work, if the Defiant falls, I'm ordering the rest of the fleet to make a run for deep space. We'll scatter to the stars, preserve what's left of our species. It won't come to that, Walker said with more confidence than he felt. The Defiant will prove what humanity is capable of. We'll show them that underestimating us was their biggest mistake. The Admiral nodded slowly. Good hunting, Captain. Stone out. Walker turned back to his crew, seeing the same mix of fear and determination on every face. They'd all lost someone to the Dominion. Friends, family, entire communities, gone because an alien empire decided humanity didn't deserve to exist among the stars. All hands, this is the captain, he announced shipwide. In less than an hour, we'll engage the largest Dominion fleet ever assembled. They think they know what we're capable of. They think they can predict our every move. Today, we prove them wrong. Today, we show them that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our numbers. It's our ability to do the impossible when our backs are against the wall. He paused, watching Jupiter's massive form fill more of their viewport. Every human who has fallen to the Dominion, every colony they've burned, every life they've taken, it all comes down to this moment. We carry humanity's hopes with us. Remember that. Walker out. The bridge fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by something stronger. Purpose. Contact. Jones called out suddenly. Multiple Dominion warships entering detection range. They're moving to surround our position. Walker smiled grimly. Let them come. Let them think they had the Defiant trapped against Jupiter's gravity well. They didn't understand what humanity had achieved, how their relentless attacks had pushed human innovation to heights never before imagined. Chief Miller, he called over the comm. Time's up. Is the resonance cascade ready? Not quite, came the reply, accompanied by the sound of frantic activity. But it's as ready as it's going to be. We'll have one shot at this, Captain. If the calculations are wrong. "They're not wrong," Walker said firmly. "Because they can't be. All hands. Battle stations. Humanity's future begins now." The Defiant's engines hummed to life, her revolutionary design allowing her to move in ways that defied conventional space combat doctrine. Above them, the first wave of Dominion warships began their attack run, their purple-tinted shields glowing with deadly promise. The final battle for humanity's survival was about to begin, and one human warship was about to change everything. Deep in the engineering section of the HSS Defiant, Chief Engineer Tom Miller wiped sweat from his forehead as he studied the pulsing core of the resonance cascade system. The experimental weapon looked deceptively simple, a sphere of crystalline material surrounded by rings of spinning quantum sensors, but its simplicity was an illusion. Inside that sphere, laws of physics were being bent in ways that would have seemed impossible just 3 years ago. "Chief," called out one of his engineers, pointing to a screen filled with rapidly changing numbers. "The containment field is fluctuating again. We're seeing microfractures in the quantum matrix." Miller rushed to the console, his experienced eyes scanning the data streams. The Dominion's attack on Mars had killed his wife and daughter, but it had also given humanity its first real look at their shield technology. The aliens used quantum fields to create their supposedly impenetrable defenses. Now, humanity would use that same science against them. "Reroute power from secondary systems," Miller ordered, his fingers flying across the control panel. "And get me a direct line to the bridge. Captain needs to know what we're dealing with." The ship shuddered as the first wave of Dominion weapons fire struck their shields. The Defiant's revolutionary design absorbed the impact better than any previous human vessel, but they couldn't take sustained fire for long. "Bridge, this is engineering," Miller called out. "Captain, we've got a problem. The resonance cascade is stable, but barely. Using it at anything less than optimal power could tear us apart." On the bridge, Captain Walker gripped his command chair as another blast rocked the ship. Through the main viewport, he could see dozens of Dominion warships moving into attack position. Their purple-tinted shields created an ethereal glow against Jupiter's swirling storms. "Define tear us apart, Chief," Walker replied, keeping his voice steady for the crew's benefit. "Are we talking about damage or complete destruction?" "Complete molecular dissociation," Miller answered grimly. "The quantum fields we're generating. They're like nothing we've ever seen. One wrong move and we'll create a cascade failure that'll make an antimatter explosion look like a firecracker." Walker absorbed this information as he watched more Dominion ships appear from hyperspace. They were taking no chances, committing overwhelming force to destroy the Defiant before she could use her mysterious new weapon. "Lieutenant Reed," Walker called to his tactical officer, "bring us about. Plot a course between those two heavy cruisers. Let's show them what this ship can do." The Defiant moved with impossible grace for a vessel her size. The inertial dampeners Miller had designed allowed maneuvers that Dominion tactical computers classified as physically impossible. They expected human ships to move like lumbering beasts. The Defiant danced. "Multiple targeting locks," Jones shouted from his sensor station. "They're coordinating their fire." "Evasive pattern Delta," Walker ordered. "Chief Miller, what do you need to get that weapon ready?" "Time and power," Miller replied through gritted teeth. "The quantum matrix needs to be perfectly aligned. Rush it, and we'll have more than just the Dominion to worry about." The ship's AI displayed possible escape routes on the tactical screen, but Walker saw they were running out of options. The Dominion was hurting them, using their superior numbers to force the Defiant into a vulnerable position. Suddenly, a new signal caught everyone's attention. A massive ship dropped out of hyperspace, easily 3 times the size of a standard Dominion cruiser. Its hull was decorated with intricate patterns of pulsing light, marking it as the Supreme Commander's flagship. "All hands, brace for impact," Walker shouted as the flagship's main weapon charged up. The beam that struck the Defiant was more powerful than anything they'd encountered before. Shields flared bright enough to blind the bridge crew momentarily. Shields at 40%, Rogers reported, her fingers dancing across her console to reroute emergency power. One more hit like that, and we're done. In engineering, Miller watched in horror as the quantum matrix began to destabilize. The massive energy surge from the hit had affected the delicate calibrations they'd spent hours perfecting. But as he studied the readings, something caught his eye. "Captain," he called out, excitement creeping into his voice. "That hit, it showed us something. The frequency of their main weapon. It's operating on the same quantum principles as their shields. If we can match that frequency," Walker understood immediately, "we can use their own weapon's energy to power the resonance cascade." "Exactly," Miller confirmed. "But we'll need to get hit again, and this time we need to be ready for it. I'm going to modify the shield harmonics to channel the energy directly into the quantum matrix." It was an insane plan. The kind of desperate gamble that only humans would attempt. Any other species would consider it suicide to deliberately take a hit from the most powerful weapon in the Dominion fleet. "How close do we need to be?" Walker asked, already formulating a plan. "Point-blank range," Miller replied. "Their weapon's energy disperses over distance. We need to take the hit at less than 10 kilometers to capture enough power." Walker looked at his bridge crew. They didn't need to speak. Every human on board knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about showing the galaxy that humanity would never submit, never accept defeat, even in the face of impossible odds. "All hands," Walker announced shipwide. "Prepare for close-quarters combat. Chief Miller, you'll get your power source. Lieutenant Reed, plot a direct course for the Supreme Commander's flagship. Let's introduce ourselves properly." The Defiant's engines roared to life, pushing the ship straight toward the massive alien vessel. Dominion ships scrambled to intercept, but the human warship's superior maneuverability allowed it to slip through their formation. "They're charging their main weapon," Jones reported, his voice tense but controlled. "Hold course," Walker ordered. "Chief Miller, status of the quantum matrix." "Recalibrated and ready," Miller replied. "But Captain, if this doesn't work..." "It'll work," Walker cut him off. "Because it has to. All hands, brace for impact in 3, 2, 1. The Supreme Commander's flagship fired, its beam of concentrated energy striking the Defiant head-on. The human warship's shields flared brilliantly, channeling the massive surge of power directly into the experimental weapon systems. In engineering, Miller watched in awe as the quantum matrix stabilized, powered by the very weapon meant to destroy them. The crystalline sphere at the heart of the resonance cascade began to pulse with an otherworldly light. "Energy capture successful," he shouted over the comm. "Quantum matrix is charged and stable. Captain, we're ready." On the bridge, Walker allowed himself a small smile. The Dominion had just given them exactly what they needed. Now it was time to show them humanity's response. "All power to the resonance cascade," he ordered. "Let's show them what happens when they push humanity too far." The experimental weapon began to power up, its energy readings climbing past anything human instruments were designed to measure. The fate of Earth, of all humanity, now rested on what would happen in the next few seconds. The space between the Defiant and the Supreme Commander's flagship crackled with energy. Lightning-like tendrils of quantum energy danced across the human warship's hull as the resonance cascade system reached full power. The weapon's distinctive hum echoed through every deck, a sound unlike anything ever heard on a human vessel before. "Energy levels are off the charts," Miller reported from engineering, his voice tight with tension. "The containment fields are holding, but just barely. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now." Walker watched as more Dominion ships moved to surround them. They were trapped between Jupiter's swirling storms below and the alien armada above. But for the first time since the war began, he saw something new in the Dominion's tactics. Hesitation. "They're afraid," Lieutenant Reed said, voicing what everyone on the bridge had noticed. "Look at their formation. They're keeping their distance." A harsh laugh echoed through the bridge speakers. It took everyone a moment to realize it was coming from the main communication channel. The Supreme Commander himself was hailing them. "Brave little humans," the alien's voice dripped with contempt, translated by the ship's computers. "Always so creative in your final moments. Did you think we wouldn't notice the energy readings from your vessel? Whatever weapon you've built, it cannot save you now." Walker signaled for the channel to be muted. "Chief Miller, what's the status of the quantum field?" "It's stable, but different from our simulations," Miller replied. "The energy we absorbed from their weapon. It's creating patterns we've never seen before. The quantum resonance is spreading faster than we predicted." Before Walker could respond, the ship's sensors blared a warning. The Dominion fleet was powering up their weapons. Not just the flagship this time. Every ship within range was preparing to fire. "They're not taking chances anymore," Jones called from his station, reading multiple targeting locks. "They're going to hit us with everything they have." Walker's mind raced. The resonance cascade was ready, but they hadn't planned for this scenario. Their original strategy called for targeting the Supreme Commander's flagship first, using it as a proof of concept. But with the entire fleet preparing to fire. "Chief Miller," he called out suddenly, "the quantum resonance you mentioned, could it affect multiple ships at once?" There was a pause as Miller ran the calculations. "Theoretically, yes. The field would propagate through their shield frequencies. But Captain, we've never tested it at this scale. The energy requirements would be met by their own weapons," Walker finished. "Just like before, but multiplied." "Jones, how many ships are charging weapons?" 217, sir. All within a 50,000-kilometer radius." Walker smiled. The Dominion's greatest strength, their overwhelming numbers and firepower, was about to become their greatest weakness. "Chief Miller, prepare to channel all incoming energy directly into the resonance cascade. Lieutenant Reed, rotate our shield harmonics to match the frequency we recorded from their last attack." "Sir." Reed looked uncertain. "That would weaken our shields against their weapons." "Exactly," Walker replied. "We're not going to defend against their attack. We're going to absorb it." Understanding dawned on the bridge crew's faces. It was the kind of plan that made humans unique among the galaxy's species, using an enemy's strength against them in ways they'd never expect. The Supreme Commander's voice crackled through the speakers again. "Your silence speaks volumes, humans. Know that your defeat will be remembered as the moment when your species finally learned its place in the universe." Walker reopened the channel. "Actually, we were just doing some final calculations. But you're right about one thing. This moment will be remembered, just not the way you think." He closed the channel before the alien could respond. All hands braced for multiple impacts. "Chief Miller, on my mark, activate the resonance cascade." Time seemed to slow as hundreds of energy weapons powered up across the Dominion fleet. Their purple-tinted shields pulsed in sync, creating a stunning display against the backdrop of Jupiter's storms. "Enemy weapons at 90% charge," Jones reported. "Hold position," Walker ordered. They needed the aliens to commit fully to their attack. 95%. In engineering, Miller's hands hovered over the resonance cascade controls. The quantum matrix was humming louder now, as if sensing what was coming. All ships, weapons locked. "Steady." Walker gripped his chair as the Dominion fleet prepared to fire. Everything hinged on this moment. The space around the Defiant lit up as hundreds of energy beams struck simultaneously. The ship's shields flared brilliantly, absorbing rather than deflecting the massive energy surge. Warning alarms blared throughout the vessel as systems were pushed far beyond their designed limits. "Now, Chief Miller, activate the cascade." Miller slammed his hand down on the activation panel. The crystalline sphere at the heart of the weapon pulsed once, twice, and then released a wave of quantum energy unlike anything ever seen in human space. The wave spread outward at near light speed, invisible except where it intersected with Dominion shields. There, it created a spectacular reaction. The aliens' purple barrier fields flickered, destabilized, and then collapsed completely as the quantum resonance disrupted their fundamental structure. "It's working," Jones shouted, his professional demeanor cracking with excitement. Dominion shields are failing across the entire fleet. On the bridge of his flagship, the Supreme Commander watched in horror as his fleet's impenetrable defenses evaporated. The impossible had happened. The primitives had found a way to turn his own technology against him. The wave continued to spread, touching ship after ship. Without their shields, the Dominion vessels were far more vulnerable than human ships. They'd relied so heavily on their superior defenses that their hull armor was relatively light. "Send word to Admiral Stone," Walker ordered. "Tell the fleet to target any ship that's lost its shields. Focus on their engine sections first." The human fleet, which had been holding position at the edge of the battle, now surged forward. What had seemed like a hopeless last stand was transforming into humanity's first real chance at victory. "Captain," Miller's voice came through the comm, "the quantum matrix is still stable. We can fire again if needed." Walker looked at his tactical display. The Dominion fleet was in chaos. Ships were trying to retreat, but their formation had been too tight. They were colliding with each other in their panic to escape. "Belay that, Chief," he replied. "Save the power. I think we've made our point." The Supreme Commander's voice came through the comm one final time. But now the arrogance was gone. What have you done?" "We did exactly what humans always do," Walker answered calmly. "We looked at something impossible, and then we found a way to do it anyway. Now shall we discuss the terms of your surrender?" The battle wasn't over yet. Many Dominion ships still had weapons, and they were far from defenseless. But everything had changed. The myth of their invincibility had been shattered, and every ship in their fleet now knew that humanity had found a way to strip away their greatest advantage. The human warship that changed everything had lived up to its name. Now the real war could begin, not as predator versus prey, but as equals. The battle above Jupiter had transformed into something no one had ever seen before. Dominion ships, their once impenetrable shields stripped away, scattered in disarray. The human fleet pressed their advantage, but Walker knew the enemy was far from beaten. Cornered animals were often the most dangerous, and the Dominion fleet still outnumbered them greatly. "Multiple energy spikes," Jones called from his sensor station. "The Dominion ships are reconfiguring their weapons. They're increasing power output to compensate for lost shields." Through the Defiance viewport, Walker watched as the alien vessels began to regroup. The Supreme Commander's flagship remained at the center of their formation, but now smaller ships moved to surround it protectively. Without their shields, they would use their own ships as armor. "Chief Miller," Walker called to engineering. "Status of the resonance cascade." "The system's stable, but cooling down," Miller replied between deep breaths. "That pulse took more out of us than expected. We'll need at least 30 minutes before we can fire again." Walker nodded grimly. 30 minutes was an eternity in space combat. The Dominion wouldn't give them that much time. Already, their fleet was adopting new tactics, breaking into smaller groups that would be harder to hit with a single pulse. "Captain," Lieutenant Rogers spoke up from her station, "Admiral Stone is requesting instructions for the fleet. The Dominion ships are vulnerable, but they still have superior numbers and firepower." Before Walker could respond, the ship's sensors detected new movement. The Dominion fleet was launching fighters, thousands of them. Without their capital ship's shields to worry about, they could commit fully to an aggressive assault. They're changing tactics, Reed observed from tactical. Small, fast attacks from multiple directions. They're hoping to overwhelm us before we can fire the cascade again. Walker studied the tactical display, watching the swarm of enemy fighters approach. The Dominion was adapting faster than expected, turning what should have been their moment of triumph into a desperate race against time. "Send word to the fleet," he ordered. "Form defensive clusters. Use our point defense systems to cover each other. And get me Chief Miller again." The engineer's voice came through moments later, sounding exhausted but determined. "Go ahead, Captain." "Tom, I need options. The Dominion is switching to fighter swarms. Even without shields, they have enough ships to wear us down. Can we modify the resonance cascade for a shorter range, faster firing configuration? There was a pause filled with the sound of rapid typing. Maybe, Miller replied slowly. The quantum matrix is designed to generate a massive, expanding field. But if we narrow the focus, reduce the area of effect, we might be able to create something like a pulse cannon instead of a wave. How long? 20 minutes to reconfigure the emitters. But Captain, it would be much less powerful. We'd only affect ships within a few kilometers. Walker watched as the first wave of Dominion fighters began their attack run. Point defense lasers from the human fleet lit up space, destroying dozens of the smaller craft. But more kept coming. Do it, he ordered. We need something to even the odds. Lieutenant Reed, bring us about. We're going to show them that humans know how to adapt too. The Defiant turned gracefully, its advanced engines allowing maneuvers that other ships couldn't match. The human fleet moved with practiced precision, forming interlocking fields of fire that caught many fighters in deadly crossfire. But the Dominion had numbers on their side. For every fighter destroyed, 2 more took its place, and behind them, the larger ships were regrouping, preparing for a coordinated strike. Chief Miller reports the weapon modifications are at 40%, Rogers announced. But the Dominion fleet is moving to surround us. Heat signatures indicate they're charging weapons. The Supreme Commander's voice crackled through the comm system again. An impressive trick, humans, but not impressive enough. You've shown us your greatest weapon, and now we will show you why the Dominion has ruled space for 1,000 years. The alien fleet opened fire. Without their shields, they compensated with pure firepower. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes filled space, forcing the human ships into evasive maneuvers that broke up their defensive formation. Hull breach on Deck 4. Jones shouted as a shot struck home. Emergency force fields holding, but our armor won't take much more of this. Walker gripped his chair as another blast rocked the ship. The Defiant's revolutionary design was tough, but they were taking hits from dozens of ships at once. Around them, other human vessels were falling back, their hulls scared and burning from multiple impacts. 15 minutes to weapon reconfiguration, Rogers reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. We don't have 15 minutes, Reed responded, hands flying over his tactical console. The fighter swarms are pressing in from all sides. Our point defense grid is overloading. Walker watched as a human cruiser exploded under concentrated fire, its crew escaping in pods that the Dominion fighters casually destroyed. The sight sparked something in him, not just anger, but clarity. All power to engines, he ordered suddenly. Plot a course directly for the Supreme Commander's flagship. His bridge crew stared at him for a moment before understanding dawned. Without shields, the Dominion capital ships were relying on their fighters for protection, which meant they'll have to break off their attack to avoid hitting their own command ship. Reed finished the thought, already adjusting their course. The Defiant surged forward, its powerful engines pushing it through the swarm of fighters. As predicted, the smaller craft scattered to avoid collision with their flagship, creating a momentary gap in their attack. Chief Miller, Walker called out. Status. 10 more minutes. Miller shouted back over the sound of sparking electronics. The quantum matrix is realigning, but we're pushing the systems beyond safety limits. The Dominion isn't going to give us 10 minutes, Walker replied. We need that weapon now. Divert all non-essential power. Shut down everything we don't absolutely need. In engineering, Miller and his team worked frantically, pushing the experimental weapons systems to their absolute limit. Warning lights flashed across every console as they bypassed safety protocols and redlined power systems. The Defiant shuddered as more hits found their mark. Hull plating buckled, internal systems sparked and failed, but still they pressed on toward the Supreme Commander's massive vessel. 5 kilometers to target, Reed announced. The flagship is powering up its main gun. Chief Miller, Walker asked one final time. Not ready. Miller's voice was strained. "The matrix isn't stable. If we fire now." "If we don't fire, we're dead anyway." Walker cut him off. "Do it, Chief. Trust in human engineering." Miller hesitated for just a moment, then slammed his hand down on the activation panel. The resonance cascade system hummed to life, but the sound was different now, higher pitched, almost screaming. The modified weapon fired, releasing not a wave, but a concentrated beam of quantum energy. It struck the Supreme Commander's flagship dead center, the focused power of the cascade tearing through the unshielded hull like paper. Secondary explosions rippled along the massive vessel's length as its power systems overloaded. The Dominion fighters broke formation, suddenly directionless without their command ship's guidance. But aboard the Defiant, celebrations would have to wait. The modified cascade had taken its toll on the ship's systems. Alarms blared throughout every deck as power fluctuations cascaded through the grid. "Multiple system failures," Rogers reported. "The quantum matrix is going critical." Walker looked out at the chaos they'd created. The burning Dominion flagship, the scattered fighter squadrons, the human fleet regrouping for another attack. They'd changed the course of the war, but at what cost? "All hands," he announced shipwide. "Brace for impact. This isn't over yet." The Defiant hung in space above Jupiter, its hull scared and burning from dozens of direct hits. Warning sirens blared through every deck as the modified resonance cascade system threatened to tear itself apart. But none of that mattered to the crew watching the Supreme Commander's flagship break apart, secondary explosions rippling along its length. "Power systems critical." Miller's voice cracked through the comm. "The quantum matrix is destabilizing. We need to shut it down now." Walker gripped his command chair as another tremor ran through the ship. Around them, the remains of the Dominion fleet hung in disarray, their fighters flying in confused patterns without central coordination. But he knew this moment of chaos wouldn't last long. "Status of the Supreme Commander's ship," he demanded. Jones worked his sensor console frantically. "Their main power core is going critical. Reading multiple escape pods launching." "Sir, I'm detecting the Supreme Commander's personal transport among them." Walker leaned forward. The architect of humanity's near extinction was trying to escape. Part of him wanted to order the Defiant to pursue, to end this here and now. But another explosion rocked the ship, making the decision for him. "Chief Miller, shut down the cascade. All power to structural integrity and life support. Lieutenant Reed, get us clear of the flagship's blast radius." The Defiant's engines flared as they pulled away from the dying alien vessel. Behind them, the Supreme Commander's flagship finally succumbed to its wounds, exploding in a spectacular display that briefly rivaled Jupiter's brightness. "The blast is causing a chain reaction in the quantum fields," Miller reported. "It's affecting all nearby Dominion ships that were exposed to the cascade." Through the viewport, Walker watched as ship after ship lost power, their systems overloaded by the quantum backwash from their commander's destruction. What had started as a desperate gamble had turned into a devastating blow against the supposedly invincible Dominion fleet. "Sir," Rogers called out, "incoming transmission from Admiral Stone. The remaining Dominion capital ships are retreating. Their fighter screen is withdrawing to cover their escape." A cheer went up from the bridge crew, but Walker raised his hand for silence. "Chief Miller, what's the status of our ship?" There was a long pause before the engineer replied. "Not good, Captain. The modified cascade burned out most of our power conduits. We're running on emergency systems, and those won't last long. But, sir, you need to see these readings. The quantum field effects we created, they're still spreading." Walker frowned. "Spreading how?" "It's like a ripple in space-time," Miller explained, his voice filled with wonder despite their situation. "The cascade didn't just disable their shields. It created a persistent effect that's propagating through subspace. Any Dominion ship that tries to raise shields within this region of space will have them fail immediately." The implications hit Walker like a physical blow. They hadn't just won a battle, They'd created a weapon that could deny the Dominion their greatest advantage across an entire sector of space. "Admiral Stone is requesting all ships report in," Rogers announced. "The human fleet took heavy losses, but we're still combat effective. 16 ships reporting major damage, 12 destroyed." Walker closed his eyes briefly, honoring the sacrifices made. When he opened them, his voice was firm. "Send word to the fleet. The Dominion will be back, and in greater numbers. But now, they know we can hurt them. More importantly, they know we can adapt." The next few hours passed in a blur of damage control and rescue operations. The human fleet worked together to recover escape pods and salvage what they could from the battlefield. The Defiant, despite its critical condition, became a symbol of hope as news of its achievement spread through the surviving ships. 3 days later, Walker stood in a hastily assembled conference room on Europa Base, Earth's last remaining outpost in the Jupiter system. Admiral Stone and the other fleet commanders had gathered to discuss the battle's implications. "The resonance cascade effect is still expanding," Miller explained to the assembled officers, his uniform wrinkled from endless hours of analysis. "Our best estimates suggest it will cover the entire Jupiter system within a week. Any Dominion ship that enters the affected space will be unable to raise shields." "And can they counter it?" one of the commanders asked. Miller shook his head. "Not quickly. The quantum principles we uncovered, they're fundamental to how their shield technology works. They'd need to completely redesign their defense systems from the ground up." Admiral Stone stood slowly, his aged face showing both exhaustion and determination. "Then we press our advantage. The Defiant has shown us the way forward. Every ship in the fleet will be fitted with a resonance cascade system as soon as possible." "Sir," Walker interjected, "the Defiant systems were experimental, dangerous. We nearly lost the ship." "Then we'll improve them," Stone replied firmly. "That's what humans do, isn't it? We learn, we adapt, we overcome. The Dominion thought they had us beaten, but they didn't understand what they were really fighting." He walked to the viewport, staring out at Jupiter's massive form. "They saw us as primitives playing with technology we didn't understand. But they forgot something crucial. Sometimes not knowing something is impossible is the first step to making it possible." The room fell silent as his words sank in. Every person there had lost friends, family, entire worlds to the Dominion's aggression. But now, for the first time, they had hope. "The Supreme Commander escaped," Walker reminded them. "He'll return with an even larger fleet." "Let him come," Stone said, turning back to face them. "When he does, he'll find more than one human ship waiting for him. The Defiant showed us the way. Now it's time to show the galaxy what humanity can really do." As the meeting concluded, Walker found himself back on the Defiant's bridge. The ship was still undergoing repairs, its systems being rebuilt better and stronger than before. Engineers from across the fleet swarmed through its corridors, studying every aspect of the revolutionary design that had changed the course of the war. "Captain," Miller called from the doorway, "the first set of improvements to the Cascade system are ready for review. We think we can increase its range by 40% while reducing power consumption." Walker smiled. Already they were improving on the original design, making it more efficient, more effective. That was humanity's true strength, not just creating something new, but constantly making it better. "Get to work, Chief," he ordered. "The Dominion will be back, and I want the Defiant ready to show them something new when they arrive." As Miller left, Walker looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Supreme Commander was gathering his forces, planning his revenge. But things would be different next time. The human warship that changed everything had done more than win a battle. It had